All right, in front of you, you all have the pretest. May not make a lot of sense to you right now, but you also have, I emailed you a folder this morning that has both this piece of paper in it and the executable as far as what you're supposed to be creating. All right, they were both mailed to you this morning. So if you take a look up on the screen here, this is what's in the folder. There's the pretest, and you've got a hard copy now and an electronic copy. This is the actual pretest itself. I want to just take a minute to go over it. I didn't put a lot of instructions in there. Now, one thing to notice is, well, yeah, I don't know what the heck to do. If you look on the screen here, if you do take your mouse and you place it over the button there, the instructions button, those are most of the instructions that you'll need to complete this. All right, so that's in the hover event for both the button and for the menu option. All right, I tried to keep this simple because I didn't know how long it would take people to do. All right, so notice under employee type you can choose 1 hourly, 2 commission, or 3 piece worker. And let's just say we choose hourly. Regardless of what you choose, they all have an hour's worked and an hourly rate. I didn't want to make different calculations. I didn't want to make you, we've already done that kind of stuff. So I wasn't that concerned with that. So let's say a person worked hourly, they work 40 hours, they make $10 an hour. You click the calculate button, and as you can see, you get all that information. That should be pretty obvious to you as far as what's happening there. All right? That information is also not just being shown on the list box, but it's being taken from the list box and being written to a file. All right? And just so you see that, that's not it. There's the file, and this is the one that I just wrote. I've got it in there as an append, so I'd run it a few times before, but you can see employee type 1 hourly, hours work 40, hourly rate 10, gross pay 400. All right, and if I go back in there, I'm going to close this, and if I run the program one more time, and I'll just just put some stuff in there. So let's see, commission worker, let's just say they worked, I think I put the maximum hours in there of 84. I think I put the maximum salary of 100. All right, so you see that's all in there. All right, exit, you know how to do that. So, and if I go back and look at the file again, there's the one I just put in. $84, 100, 8,400. So what I'd like you to do between now and about 10 o'clock or so, so you got about 2 hours to look at this, is to run through all this stuff. As it says, I purposely gave you very little guidance. All right, so the executable represents your program requirements. I do want you to use good programming practices. This will be part of your grade tomorrow. I want a tab order. I want the accept button set. I want the cancel button set. I want the Windows Start position to be set to center screen. I want this to look professional. I want you to put comments in. You don't have to put tons of them in there, but you should put in some comments. You'll see later when I go over my key what I did. All right? And no, I mean, you can type in whatever you want when we go over this, but I'm not making this key available. The test isn't that different from the key. All right? As far as these instructions, that was a lot to type. So you now have this right there. If you want to use that for your instructions, you can. Don't copy it right from a Word document and throw it into Visual Basic. You're asking for trouble. So if you want to use this, just copy it to the clipboard. Bring up Notepad. You don't even need Notepad++, just Notepad. Paste it in there, and then copy it from Notepad into your program, and then it'll work fine. All right, but don't copy it in directly from Word. It may work, it may not work. That's why. All right, so as it says, you've got from now until 10:05 to work on this. If everybody gets done early, then we'll start going over it, the key at that time. But if there's even one person who's still working on it at 10:05, that's fine. So at about 10:15 until the end of class, I'll go over how I did this and what I'd be looking for. Does that all make sense? All right. And you'll notice when you look at the executable also, again, I just want to make sure that you notice this, because this is stuff you'll be expected to do tomorrow. That it works from the button or from the menu option. All right. On all of these, that's the hover for the button, that's the hover for the menu option. And this is the same thing, and I'd sent you this twice on the exit button. So I'll expect this to look professional. Why? Because I'll want this last test to be one of the things that you link to the executable in your portfolio. All right? So as you're going through this, if you have questions on anything, just come up here and let me know. Otherwise, hopefully it makes sense what I'm asking you to do. All right? So you've got until, like I said, about 10 o'clock. Yes. You're what? Let's see. It shouldn't be corrupted. Were other people able to open yours? Everybody else able to open your executable? What's that? How about this? Other than you two, is everybody else able to open it? Okay, so why don't you start on it and we'll take a look. Oh, just told it to ignore it? Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to pause this until we start back up again. All right, we're still waiting on Ethan, but I'm going to start up anyway. I got sent this on Friday by Jeremy. He said, Jeff, just happened to be browsing this company's website and saw this job posting. This is a place that is in Chesterfield, and they are looking for an intern, a C# intern. I just sent this to you, and if you do bring it up, it looks like this. It's called MyTech. I don't know how well you can read that, but software intern. Now, some of the stuff you're not going to have, but code, test, and debug using Microsoft C#. Well, that would be one thing you'd have. But with some of the other stuff, they ask for a working knowledge of SQL. Well, that's what you're going to start to get later this week and for the rest of the semester. But if it's something that you have an interest in, I would strongly suggest, there it is, that you apply for it. All right? All right, that said, let's just take a look. I've got my cheat sheet, or whatever you call it, so to speak. But you all have the pretest in front of you, so I'm not going to bring that up. I'm just going to work from here. Now, this is the way that I did it. Okay, I'm telling you, I'm not saying this is the only way of doing it. But as often seen, I created 4 constants. Min hours was 0. Okay, fine. And I had a max hours, and the max hours on there will be 84. I had a minimum rate, which was also 0, and a maximum rate. That didn't work out, did it? And that was set equal to 100. All right. Now, hopefully, we've gotten to the point where you look at that, there aren't any questions about that. Okay? All right. So, first thing I did, this is what I do. Again, I'm not saying this is what you should do. I'm not saying this is the best way of doing things. I don't mean any of that stuff. But what I did, first of all, was I like to come in here and say, okay, I double-clicked on the Calculate button. Then I double-clicked on the Calculate menu option that's up here. Then I did the same for the instructions, but not, that is not click, that's the hover, and the hover for the instructions, and then the same thing with exit. Does that make sense? You don't have to do it that way. Doesn't work any better. I know that Colin mentioned that, but one thing I like to do is I like to keep code together that I think belongs together. I find that when I do that, it makes it much easier when I'm going through things. Now, a couple things, I'm just going to run through these quickly because this is all stuff we've had. So again, method called when the exit button clicked, I just called it exit program. Method called when the exit menu option clicked, I called it exit program. This is the same code that I had sent to you. All right. So I like to put that in there first. That way I can run it and at least make sure when I run it that the exit appears to work. All right. And if I say no, I should be able to do it from here also. Good. Now if I say yes, now that's done. Now that should make sense to everybody in here. All right. All right. The next thing, and I'm just showing you this because I gave it to you. That's nice. Is I went and grabbed all of this stuff, as I mentioned, right there, copied it to the clipboard, went in, and I guess I already had it here, but put it into here, all right? And then came in and in the program also, so now this display instructions, I just pasted that in. But again, with this, notice that, method invoked when the hover is chosen, and method invoked when the hover on the button and the hover on the menu item, all right? And that's all that's in here. Now, after I do that, I have to put in a message box.show. Hopefully you realize that. And then it's just message. I just put like instructions. I like to put in like an OK button, and this was information. So now that's in there. So now with those two little things, I've already got a bunch of this done. That you've already seen, but now if I put my mouse over here, or if I put my mouse over here, you're going to be asked to do a similar thing tomorrow. All right, like I said, it's not very different. There's an exit button, there's an instructions button, there's a calculate button. There's a calculate menu option, there's an instructions menu option, and there's an exit menu option. Okay, that shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. So now all that stuff is done. So I went over the instructions and I went over the exit. All right, so let's take a look at what's left. Now I want to bring up the, just run it for a second and take a look at some of the things that are in there. All right, well, first of all, okay, what you may or may not have noticed this, but if I click on here, and as an example, I'll just choose hourly. I'm just putting in garbage values. I don't care what they are. All right, but if I click on here again, so if I click on the combo box and I make a different choice, all right, 4 things are going to happen there. This clears, this clears, this clears, and the stuff is written to the list box. Does that make sense? All right. So all of that stuff basically, and I don't have to write it to the list box then, but I actually wrote it earlier, but at a minimum, you've got to clear these 3 things out. That's what you're supposed to do. All right. So how do we do those? Well, okay, the event that's going to take place when you do this, come on, well, because I'm running the program, that's why it's doing it, is going to be the selected index changed event. All right, so what I just called it simply clear inputs. and this is what I put in there. Now, you may or may not have noticed this. If you look up on your screen, on the screen, please, notice when I do this, and I click hourly, and I put in numbers. Watch the button right here, the calculate button. Can you see that it's now disabled? All right. A lot of people write their programs and they write them for lack of better words, and I don't know if this is a word, cheesy like. So in other words, if somebody is just very, it does not do a good job, they're lazy or whatever, if you didn't have this in there, if that didn't get disabled, I could just keep pressing calculate again and again and again. That's not the way you really should write a program. All right. So literally, when I choose a new option here, I want this to disappear, this to disappear, this to disappear, and I want that to become enabled. All right. So that's what I want to have happen. And if you look here, that's what happens. All right. And again, not really rocket science as far as what's happening there. So I'm just going to grab this, copy it to the clipboard, and move it to the other one. So when I cleared the inputs, the first text box I cleared, the second text box I cleared, the list box I cleared, and I made the button enabled. Any questions on that? All right. Hopefully by now that's fairly simplistic to you. All right. Okay, so let's think about what else we have to do. All right, because there's still quite a bit. Well, the first thing that I did was I wanted to come in here and I wanted to set up any variables that I'd need. Now, if you look up on the screen again, it should be obvious to you that I want a variable for hours worked, I want a variable for hourly rate, and I want a variable for gross pay. I want numeric variables for each one of those. Now, some people really get hung up on this and say, well, you know what? You're figuring out gross pay, and that's currency. You're figuring out hours worked, and that's currency. And you've got hours worked and the hourly rate. You really could make them all decimal if you wanted to. All right? I just have a tendency to make everything doubles if they're going to have a decimal place in them. But you could make them of type decimal if you wanted to do so. All right? So when I came in here, the first thing that I did was to, again, declare and initialize local variables. By now, the idea of local variables should make sense to you. I'm declaring them in this routine, so they're only available in this routine unless I plan to pass them to another routine, which I don't. All right, so I'm going to have here double hours worked, and I set it equal to 0.0. You can put a comment there, hours worked. Now, do you really need a comment right there? You can make your case one way or the other. You could say, you really don't need a comment there. You're using names that are specific enough that you really don't need these. I wouldn't even disagree with that. But again, I think I've said this to you in the past. I have never done work for anybody in my life where they've turned around and said, I really wish you wouldn't comment so much. It just doesn't happen. So this is literally just what? Hours worked, times hourly rate. That's it. So those are the variables that I'm going to use in here. All right. Now let's take a look at what it says here. Validate hours worked and hourly rate fields. If anything is invalid, invoke the associated exception. If all is valid, calculate the gross pay. Then do all this stuff. Oh, well, I'm going to take that comment, I'm going to move that down. All right. The first thing I have to account for, think about this. I mean, literally, play computer. What if they didn't choose anything in there? Nothing at all. You shouldn't do the calculation. Because, again, we're doing the same calculation every time. I understand that. But it would be possible that you might have different things show down below based on which of those they chose. All right. So what I did was I said, hey, you know what? If and again, does anybody remember? If none of these is, how do I tell whether or not none of those are chosen? So if, what's that? Yes, but if what's -1? Selected index. So right now it's not doing anything because I haven't put any code in yet. But what I want to say, and you're both right, what I want to do is I want to come in here and say if the combo box, which I called combo box employee type, dot selected index, if that equals -1, that means that you have not chosen anything. All right. So all I did was I came up, and again, I'm going to try not to sit there and just keep typing in front of you and bore you with that. So I'll just show you what I put in here. You know. So I put in this. You must choose an employee type, no employee type chosen, and I return. There's no sense in going on. That's why I hit return. All right. So you'll notice that with this in there now, when I click this and I choose nothing, you must choose an employee type. That's good. It should also work from there. That's all we're doing so far, but that's what we want to do. All right? So we're letting the user know. I mean, that's about all you can do. I've said this to you before. I'm not trying to be funny here. It's not funny. There's no accounting for human stupidity. Because if the person just keeps doing it wrong and doing it wrong and doing it wrong, you've got two choices. Let them keep doing it wrong, or eventually tell them you're hopeless. And don't let them continue. Again, it's the same type of way as, if you've ever gone in where you key in for like your rank in email or anything, and if you screw up your password 2 or 3 times, typically it locks you out. We could do the same thing here if we wanted to. That'd be another thing that, yeah. The comment was, should that be disabled until you put something in there? That'd be another thing that probably would be a good idea. All right, so right now you could have it disabled. How do you do it? If you write it in another routine and you call that routine from here, it should do it also. Because you're telling it to do the same thing, it's just where you're calling it from. That's all. All right, so that's going to basically validate. In fact, I'm going to grab this whole comment here. I'm going to shoot that down a little. And I'll put another comment up here that says, make sure that a combo box entry was chosen. Okay? I mean, what you put in there isn't that important, but you should put something in there. All right, so that's first thing. Now I want to come in here and I want to start doing all this stuff. All right? Hopefully, what I'm about to tell you makes sense, and that is that in all this stuff here, when you see that word, validate, that means that something can potentially go wrong. What does that mean? That means that either I'm going to need an if statement, or I'm going to need a try-catch block, or I'm going to need a combination of try-catch and an if statement. All right? So what I did was I grabbed all this stuff and put in first a try block. Now you notice immediately I'm going to start getting error messages, all right, because there's no catch. Whoops. All right. Now it's giving me that error message because it doesn't know what it's supposed to be catching. But I just like to put that in there to start with. Do you have to do that? No. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to check for no hours worked input. All right, that's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to say if text box hours worked dot text equal this. That means literally I put nothing in there. All right? So if that's the case, literally, just so you know, literally what that is that's a format exception. The format that it's expecting is a number. I've just put in something non-numeric. All right, so I did a throw, new, format exception, and I put, went down to the next line so it wouldn't go off the screen when I showed it to you, and I just said, hours worked cannot be blank. All right. So the first thing, and again, the order in which I do this doesn't matter. It can. Depends on how I test it. But now I know at a minimum, I've got to test for a format exception here. And when I check for that format exception, what I ended up putting in, see, I'm trying to be consistent here with what I'm showing you. There it is I just put in a message box. All right. Now I could put FE dot, all that other stuff, and that would be fine. In fact, I guess I did. I said, let's put in a message box. Dot show. Remember, what goes in here first is the text that you want to have in. Well, how about FE dot message? What is that? Somebody tell me. What is that going to print? What is this print? It'll be the associated error message. Now, I could make my own and print one, or I could just print the one that's in here, and that's what I did. All right, and then I just put in here like no input given, whatever, something. All right, and again, then I came back in here with the message box button with an OK. And this is an error. All right, that literally is an error. So now I know what I can do with what I've got here is I can run the program again. Now I can choose one of these, but I can leave that blank. And you see that it's catching it. That's good. That's the way you should be used to not only writing, but testing your programs. Write a little code, test it. Write a little more code, and test it. Don't think you got to put in hundreds of lines before you start testing. All right, and again, I should be able to come in here and also, all right, do it from there. All right, so that's the first thing. All right, that will handle blank. All right, but if I do come in here and I put in this, right now that's not being handled. So I'm handling blank. So there's three types of inputs. I could have nothing, I could have non-numeric, and I could have numeric. And even with numeric, there's two kinds of numeric. There's numeric that's within range. So for this field, between 0 and 84, and there's numeric that's out of range, which means that either I've got a number less than 0 or a number greater than 84. So we have to account for all four of those. The good news, after we do this, we can just copy it basically and change everything from hours worked to hourly rate. That's a good, I mean, to me at least, that's good news. And when you test it for the first one and you've tested it and it appears to work, you still test it for the second one, but it should work then for the second one because you're doing the same kind of thing. All right. All right, so if we get down to this point, okay, again, I like to put comments in here. There is input. Check for numeric or not. All right, to me at least, that would seem like a good thing to do next. All right, again, I'm trying to do things in an order in which I think they make sense. All right. Else if Now, again, you should all be to the point right now where this makes sense to you. This says if I am not able to parse that into a double, the not, if I'm not able to, what am I trying to parse? Whatever's in the text box. In fact, was it hourly rate or hours worked? I'm sorry. Was it hour? It's hours worked. My fault. Sorry about that. All right. So if I'm not able to parse hours worked, if I am able to, it's going to go into here. If I'm not, I'm going to get an error. All right. So if that's the case, all right, if that's the case, there is input, all right, but again, I can throw this same kind of exception that I did here, but the message will be different. So I'm just going to copy that in. Not hours worked cannot be blank, but I'm going to say hours worked must be numeric. Again, don't try to confuse people. Put straightforward messages in here. All right, at least you're letting them know. So now if I go back and I run this, you've already seen if I put nothing in here, I get that hours worked cannot be blank. All right? But now if I do put in something non-numeric, I got to change that, not no input given. That should say hours worked must be numeric. All right, so I should change this, what I put here, that exception. All right, I've got here no input given. All right, maybe I don't want to put that in there. Now I've got my choice here. All right, I mean, let's just say bad input. So that'll handle either one. Now, if I wanted to, I could write my own exception. I'm going to do that next. All right, but if I wanted to, I could write my own exception. But I changed that to bad input. Now, putting that in there, whether I put in nothing, bad input, or if I put in non-numeric, it's bad input. I'm calling the same exception in both cases. The problem is, if I put no input in there, that could confuse a person to see no input. All right? And you might think, well, nobody gets confused. You're the programmer. The person running the program might easily get confused. You don't know. All right? All right, so the next thing that I want to do then, the next thing that I have to handle is, okay, now I've checked for no, no hours worked input at all. Now I've checked for numeric or not. Now I have to check to see whether or not it's within range. Again, there is no built-in exception to handle out-of-range input, so I have to write my own. This is one place I would recommend you should write, definitely write different exceptions. I've got two different fields in here. I think you'd all agree. Two different inputs. Don't worry about the employee type, but I've got an hours worked and an hourly rate. Even if they're similar, don't write one exception to handle them both, because there are two different input fields. And just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. All right? So, now I know input is numeric. Check within range or not. All right, so that's the next thing I have to check. All right, so there's different ways that you can check this, but I said this, else, if, and if nothing else, no one has, I think you should always program defensively. I don't know if I've had this talk with you or not, and I don't want to bore you with this stuff, but literally, in most programming applications, anywhere from 60 to 80% of the code that's written is error handling code. And in many ways, error handling code is like car insurance. You have to buy it, right? But you pray to God you're never going to use it. You know, in an ideal world, you're giving them thousands of dollars over your life. And if you never get into an accident, it's like, what the hell for? But that's the way it is. That's why you do it. But the thing is, if you do need it, you might need it bad. You know, some drunk hits you or whatever. All right? The same kind of way in here. You want to make sure that you have it, that your error code set up so that if the worst does happen, you account for it. The worst thing you can have happen is to put out a piece of professionally written software that somebody runs and puts in some input where they get a goofy message that means absolutely nothing to the person running the program. Because then you've let the software take control over what happens as opposed to you doing it. All right? So, else if, and again, I'm telling you, this is the way I wrote it. Okay? I said, okay, let's do this. Let's convert to double. I'm going to have to move this over so I can give myself a little bit more room here. Put that over. All right. Convert dot to double. Convert dot to double what? So, if that value is less than the min rate, or, and because I've already got it typed in here once, I'm not going to type it in again. Okay, move that over. What I'm more concerned with is, does what's going on right there make sense to everyone? I'm literally saying, if you look up on the screen here, now take whatever is in here, and you know it's a number because we've already accounted for it being blank or being non-numeric. So you know it's a number. Now take what's in there, convert it to an actual number, and check to see if it's less than 0 or if it's greater than 84. All right? That's what we're doing right there. So if either one of those are the case, now I want to throw a new hourly, oops, I didn't put it all caps, sorry. Hourly rate out of range input exception. Yeah, it seems like I tried to see just how big I could make that. All right? Why am I getting the squigglies? Because I haven't written that yet. We'll write that in just a minute. All right? You can call this anything you want, except you can't name it the name of an existing exception. All right? I like to always make sure at least I have the name exception in there and on the end. All right? I mean, I've seen all sorts of stuff. Sometimes people will literally preface this with PD, for programmer defined. You know, it depends because different places have different protocols as far as how they set this stuff up. All right? So what I want to do next is I want to come in here and I want to right mouse click and choose Add, New Item. All right? In fact, I'm going to cancel that. I want to grab all this first. Yeah, whatever. So I've got the name of it. Then I want to right mouse click on my project name, choose Add, New Item. Remember, it's a new exception class that I'm creating. So go to Class. You don't want to call it Class 1. No. You want to call this that big name, or whatever you called yours. Mine's Hours Worked Out of Range Exception.cs. Says the file already exists and I might have the other one open. Let's do this. I think I've got 2 projects open. That's the one I want. All right. File, Add, New Item. There. Now, 2 things that I have to do to get this to work. if you look up on the screen here, I've got to make two changes to this line. Does anybody know what they are? First of all, this has to be recognizable by my program, correct? The regular program. So I've got to come in here and I've got to make this public. That's the first thing. Second thing is right here. Any exception, including ones you create, must all be children of the exception class. So I have to do that. So this now says I have a public class that is called hours worked out of range exception, and it inherits from the exception class. You have to do the same thing. Again, if that confuses you, or you forget it tomorrow, or whatever, it's at the end of chapter 11. The author showed you how to do that. There is an example of this in there. All right? Again, I'm just going to grab the code from here. All right. Now, I put a message here, make that a little smaller so you can read it, that says input was numeric but is out of range. All right. Then I'm going to pass that exception to the parent class. Notice, what am I doing in here? You said not a flaming thing. You'd be correct. All right. But this is oftentimes, most times, how you write exception handlers. And the good news is it's also pretty much the same way that you will do it in Java. It's virtually identical in Java. All right? Now, I'll come back to it in just a second, but let's go back. Let's go back to here. Let's do a save all, and let's run it again. All right? It says I've got errors. Now, those are warnings. It's this one. Before the new, let's see. Oh, you're right. Thank you. Yeah, this has to be. You know what's funny? I didn't put them in, and it worked just fine. Oh, that should be hours worked. Thank you. There we go. All right. Change yours to hours worked. All right. All right. Let's run it again. And now when I choose this, now if I put a value in here that's negative, still telling me that it was unhandled. So let's see. I made that hours worked out of range input exception. Let's make sure that's exactly what I called it. And I know it isn't. Why do I know that? Because hours worked out of range input exception, hours worked out of range input exception. Public, hours worked out of range input exception, hours worked out of range input exception. Well, it does look like the errors went away. See that? All right, I want to make sure I didn't break anything. So that's still handled. That's still handled. That is not being handled correctly. So let's see. Help you detail. Input was numeric but out of range. Okay. Well, it's grabbing it. It knows that it's there. It's calling the right thing. I'm looking on my hard copy here to find out. That's exactly how I did it right here. Throw new.
For line 87 and 88, should it say in hours or hours?
Ah, thank you. That's a good point. That should say hours. That's a start. Okay. because then it changed from between, instead of 0 and 84, it was 0 and 100. But that's still, that in the year, that's a good catch. But it still should be grabbing that. Throw new hours worked out of range exceptions. Exactly what I have. Go back to this one. I'm going to just grab everything that's in there. You shouldn't do this, but I want it to work, so. Oh, good. What's that? You shouldn't, no. I want to put an else in here because if I get down to this point, it worked. Let's go on and see if it clears itself up. I don't think it's going to, but let's see. So this was no input at all. All right? So we were throwing a format exception. We were giving it that message. All right? This, there was input, but it wasn't numeric. So we're calling format exception. But we're, instead of saying hours work cannot be blank, we're saying hours work must be numeric. If we get down to here, it's numeric, but it may be out of range. So we're saying here, if we try to convert it and it's less than the minimum hours, or we try to convert it and it's greater than the maximum hours, we want to throw our new exception. Again, we'll try to see if we get that to work in a second. Finally, if we've got an else down here, it did work. It worked. So I told it to do this. And I wanted to say here, hours worked equal that. If it did work, all right, I'm telling it to do this. You can say, well, you did it up here. Remember, if I do it here, all I'm doing is I'm checking a condition here. Here I'm telling it to do something. I'm telling it to permanently change that value. All right? So in this case, so far, right now, what I have is everything with hours worked is done and it's handled. I'm going to have to change, find out why that one isn't working. Yes?
I don't think you freaking
Yeah, you're right. That's what it is. We're never catching it. Catch. And that god-awful name. Thank you. And I call it hours worked out of range right there. All right? So that's what the problem was. Because, okay, fine. You're telling it that you can have this out of, this exception, but then what do you want to do? Well, let's think about this. What do I want to do if that exception is thrown? Okay? Well, whatever's in there is junk, correct? Because it's out of range. So I want to give them a message box to let them know that it's out of range. Then I want to remove what's there. And finally, I want to put the focus there. Does that make sense? All right. Thank you. Excellent catch. Wish I had caught it, but I didn't. All right. So again, I'm going to grab, somewhere in here I've got that message box. I'm going to grab that message box. What the heck happened here? Throw new. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. change this. So if that's the case, out of range hours worked inputted. It's kind of nice if you're going to give them an error like this to let them know hours worked must be between 1 and 80, or 0 and 84, sorry. 0 and 84. Okay? Now, I could have actually used the name of my constants in there. If I wanted to, I could have used min hours and max hours. I'm just keeping it simple. All right? And do I really need to put that in there? Hours worked out of range inputted? All right. I've already got a message, don't I, in my other one? So I can just tell it to print out that message. How about HWOOR dot message? All right. Now let's take that one for a spin and see whether or not it works. So pick one of these. Now put in something that's out of range. There you go. Thank you. Now it's calling my exception. And I should check it, and I didn't put the other code in yet. I'll put that in a minute. But I should check it both for positive and negative. All right? So the other thing we said we wanted to do in here is we didn't just want to do that, all right? We also wanted to come in here and we wanted to text box hours worked dot text equals double quote text box hours worked dot focus. And to be honest with you, just to be safe, I'm getting the hell out. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. So I want to do these three things. All right. So now let's see if that indeed that worked. So I'm going to come in here, hourly, whoops, big number. All right, numeric out of range. Now does this disappear? Yes, and there's the cursor. That's how you should be writing code. You should expect that the person running it, especially when they're first starting, is not going to be able to understand what it is they're supposed to be doing. All right? So we now have handled all of these. We came in there first and said, if the hours worked is empty, throw a format exception with hours worked cannot be blank. Otherwise, we knew there was something in there, so attempt to convert it to numeric. If you couldn't, hours worked must be numeric. If you kept going, now you know it's numeric, so you have to see whether or not it's within range. If it's not within range, you've got to throw the out of range exception. All right? And now the good news is I can literally grab everything that we have in here, everything. Now, is this a good idea? Well, especially when you're kind of in a hurry, yes, it's a good idea. So I'm going to grab all of it, copy it to the clipboard. Now I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to paste it back in. Yes, I know, it's in there twice. All right, so there's the first one, and it ended right there. So now I got to change all these hours worked to hourly rate. Same thing here. And here. Now I can say max rate. And min rate. And now I'll have to throw a new hourly rate out of range exception, which again I'll get an error for because it hasn't been written yet. All right. This will have to again be hourly rate. All right. And so will this. And I'm not trying to be what's the word I want to use here? I'm not trying to be lazy here, but I'm going to do basically the same thing. So I'm going to grab all that catch code that's right there, and I'm going to paste that in. But I have to change it to the other name, which is this one. Still going to get an error message, and I'm going to get an error message on this one too. Oop, that's really ugly. Here. And now this is hourly rate, HROOR. And that must be between 0, I think we said, and 100. All right, now that's got to be text box hourly rate here and here. All right, I'm almost done. Now, you may or may not know this, but one thing I can do if I want to is I can, if you look up on the screen here, I can right mouse click on this and choose copy. I'm going to right mouse click on the other one I wrote, and I'm going to choose copy. One thing Microsoft recommends if you're going to do that, don't just come down here and choose paste. Actually right mouse click on the name of the project and put in paste. So now I've got a copy of it. Got the same thing in there. Well, I know it's got to be called this. So I'm going to highlight that. And now I'll right mouse click on here and choose rename, and I'll rename it. So there's my hourly rate exception. All right, it still doesn't, yep, it looks like all my squigglies have gone away. Now I still have to come back in here, and this has got to be hourly rate, and so does this. All right, I could have put a better message in here than input was numeric but is out of range. I could have here said input was numeric, should be between 1 and 100 or whatever. That's not, again, not that big a thing right now in the main stream of things. So let's go back to here. Now, if we put a valid number here and leave this blank, all right, bad input, hourly rate cannot be blank. That's good. And run it also off of the menu. That's good. Then let's put in something non-numeric. Hourly rate must be numeric. Hourly rate must be numeric. All of those worked. That's good. All right. Now let's put in something that's out of range. Hourly rate must be between 0 and 100. It was numeric, but it's out of range. And then let's put in something that's negative. All right. And try to run that also, I guess, from here. Whoops. Put in a big number. From here, okay. Put in. All right. So now, as far as I can tell, we've handled all of our error conditions. Does that make sense to everyone? And I know, might say, well, yeah, can you go back and all I did was copied the same code that I had up above, and everywhere that it said hours worked, I changed it to hourly rate. Does that make sense to everyone? That's all we had to do. Now the good news is if you look up on the screen here, I'm down near the bottom of my try block here. There's that big try, and it ends right here. If I got down to this point, everything worked. So now all I have to do is say gross pay equals, gross pay equals hours worked times hourly rate. That's it. All right. And that's good. Now these were my error conditions right here, and I still have all this stuff. I'm asking you this question, if everybody look up on the screen here. Do I want to do this when it works or when it doesn't work? The stuff in blue. Do I want to do that when it works or when it doesn't work? When it works. Okay? If I put my stuff that works in the try block, this has to go in the try block. All right? So I'm just going to cut that out of there. And right underneath where I do my calculation, all right, so right there, now I'm going to paste that back in. And it's really not very hard to do. All right, I've got my list box. List box, which I call list box output dot items dot add. That's the first thing I want to add. Okay? And actually I'm going to want to do this like 3 or 4 times. But what do I want to add? Well, it would be kind of nice to put some kind of a heading in there. So I'll put in here hours worked. Plus put it on the next line so it doesn't scroll off the screen here. Hours worked dot toString, and that's not a value that has a dollar sign in it because that's hours. All right, so that's the first. Actually, it's the second one because I'm gonna have to put another one in there. So hours worked, hourly rate, and hourly rate here. That will be currency. And gross pay all right, that's all correct. But if you look up on the screen, I didn't put this in yet. I got to put in the employee type. Why? Because that's what the spec said. All right. So I need a line at the top here. Basically, it's going to look almost like this. You may or may not remember this, but if you'd all look up on the screen here, this should say either 1-hourly, or it should say 2-commission, or it should say 3-piecework. The easiest way to put that in is to say combo. Oh, geez Louise. The easiest way is to come in here and just say combo box employee type dot selected item. All right. Now I'll bring this back up in a second, but what I want to do first is why don't we run it, make sure it worked. All right. So no errors. That's always a good start. Hourly, we'll put in here 30, and we'll put in here 20. Well, 29. That's fine. And then there we've got it. So that's good. There's only one more thing to do. You remember what it is? What? Write it to the list box. All right. So we'll do that next. But when you look here, all I did was I did list box, the name of the list box, dot items dot add. That's it. Oh, I guess there is a couple more things I want to do. That is, and I found this out later, but if you look up on the screen here, please, okay, when we're doing this, remember how when we started and we put in values here, remember how I took that button and I disabled it? We also really should disable the menu option, because they could still cheat and do it via the menu. So where we did that enabled before, and I don't know where it was, but I'll find it. I'll do a search here, Control F for, oops, jeez, enabled. There it is. All right, so not only do I want the calculate button to be enabled, but I want the menu. What was it called? Calculate menu item. There it is. I want that to be enabled also. So I've got to come back up here then, and we're almost done, which thank goodness. All right. So up here, I want to now disable both the button and the menu option. All right. And again, I can check this right away. So come back in here, run the program again, choose any type, doesn't matter. Okay, now that is disabled, and it's maybe you can tell, maybe you can't, but if you look up on the menu, it's gray now. All right. That's the kind of thing that if I was doing this in a web page, I would use some CSS to probably make that red also or whatever. All right. And the good news is next semester you'll learn how to use CSS with this stuff. All right. So again, now at least it appears as though the only thing that I have left to do is to actually write this out to the list box. Well, I don't know about you, but I broke a lot of rules here in that, granted, there's a lot of comments in here, okay? But I have a routine that's 140 lines long. It's actually way too long, even though out of those 140 lines, probably 60 of them are comments and blank lines. That still is a really long routine. I really should have busted that up. I didn't. But I did decide that when we got down to the bottom here, right before we finished everything, let's at least put this into its own routine. All right. So I call this write list box to file. All right. Again, I don't want to come up with names that are going to confuse people. The code should be, as much as possible, the code should be self-documenting. All right. And if Brady comes in and he's a new employee and he goes, well, what does that mean? I'm going to ask him right away, do you know what a list box is? Yeah. All right. Do you know what a file is? Yeah. Well, what is it? What do you think it means? We're taking what's in that list box and we're writing it to a file. Period. All right. And that routine to do that is not a long routine. I don't know, 10, 12 lines, something like that. But I've got it down here, write list box to file. So you'll have to write that or whatever you call yours. All right, maybe you did yours, and you called it something else. But whatever that is then. So the first thing I want to do, const string spath, all right, equal. Now this is going to be that path, all right? And thanks to Mr. Williams there, who was good enough to show me on that day that I didn't realize all that stuff was in there, it is. So I don't have to go look for it. So there's the name of the path. So I can come in here and just highlight the whole thing. You can do the same thing on yours. There are other ways to do this, just so you know. You have to say the ampersand and double quotes, God bless you. And in here, and I just called mine outfile.txt. So again, the path that you put in there is not going to be my path. This is not going to be your path. Your path, you'll have to figure out. If you don't put a path in there, we talked about this yesterday. If you don't put a path in there, I want you to. But if you don't, then what happens is the file automatically goes. I want to show you where it is. But I have 10,000 things open. All right. So it's got to go. Come on. Incomplete. There we go. Come on. Pretest. It goes right into the folder and right there. That's not where I want it. All right. I want to. I mean, actually, if that's where we want it to go. Otherwise, it goes into your bin, debug, and it'll be in there. And that's bad. The reason that that's bad is that folder gets rewritten every time you run the program because there's a new executable in there. So it cleans out the folder. All right? We don't want that to happen. We can still get it to work, but it's too much work. So we want to put that big path in there, even though it's kind of a pain in the butt to put that in. So again, your path will change. Does that have to be a constant? Technically, no, but it's never should change, should it? So you probably would want to make it a constant. All right? Then, StreamWriter. Please look up on the screen. If you type in StreamWriter, not now, but if you type it in and it doesn't work, you know that you're going to have to go back up onto the top and you're going to have to add using system.io. All right? So if you didn't do that, you better do that or it won't work. I guess I did have it here already. All right? So, StreamWriter, and again, you can call this anything you want. I called it save file. I found a good example of this online. I gave it to you the other day. All right? And I said equals file dot append text spath. Now that's not it. We're not done. I've got to put in about 4 more lines. But the point is, what I want you to understand is right there, we're using append text, which means every time we run the program, add on to it. If you use create text, then every time you run the program, it'll overwrite what was in there previously. All right? So, what I did, you didn't have to do this, was I put in a blank line after each one. That's what this is. This is just it says to print a blank line. And then when you're all done, that's the whole routine. That's it. Yes.
How come we don't need a file stream?
You could have put that in too. We don't really need to stream because of the way I set the path up, but you could have. Again, I went up and Googled it and looked at a bunch of different examples. I tried to use the one I thought was the most straightforward. So I'm going to save this, and I want to make sure, if you take a look up on the screen here, all right, that notice I do not have a file by that name in here, and there's that outfile.txt, so I'm going to get rid of it. All right, now I'm going to come back and I'm going to run the program. Hopefully I removed the right file, but we'll find out. I like to put all 3 of them in. So there's the first one. There's an hourly. There's a commission. There's the piece worker, my instructions work. All right, I could have done it from I'm using the button. I didn't have to do that. Let's just one more time, then let's exit. Boom. Now let's go back. Oops, I guess it's not there. There's outfile 1125, so it was just made, and there they are. All right. Now, is that a lot to do? Yeah. But you're going to be replicating this tomorrow. It's not going to be exactly the same program, but it's going to be darn close. So if you understood this, you should be able to do fine. The other thing I decided to do, I mentioned this to 1 or 2 of you yesterday, but I'm going to say it again now, or not yesterday, I guess Friday, but I'm going to make the test worth 150 points instead of 100 because it's actually on. There's material from Chapter 11. All right, and the Chapter 11 stuff is the exceptions. There's Chapter 12, and the Chapter 12 stuff was the control, like the list box. Chapter 13 all right, which was on events, but the only thing we're really doing is that hover. And then finally, chapter 14, which is the file stuff. So since we're actually combining information from those 4 chapters, I decided to make it worth more than the other tests were worth. All right? And I'll tell you this too. I'm not going to show it to you right now, but as far as the way that I set it up, if you look up on the screen here, let's see. I think 20 points is building the interface. All right, that's the complete interface, including everything that's shown here. So in other words, including the buttons, including the menu options, everything. That was like 20 points. 10 points was for the exit button. 10 points was for the instructions, and the hover and all that, that stuff. 10 points was for setting up a tab order, using good names. All right, all the other stuff that I showed you earlier, that's 50 of the points. The other 100 points are right here because that's the key component to the program. So you literally could get 50 out of 150 if you got everything to work except the calculate. I don't want you to do that, but I'm just saying that would at least give you 50 points. All right. Now, also, just so you know this, maybe you've already been looking at this. I don't know, because I don't know how you follow this stuff or don't follow this stuff. So when you look at this, this is the last thing that we have tomorrow, and you still have to take your test, but this is the last thing that we have tomorrow, that's why it says that is going to be in there for tests. That's it. There's nothing else. And if you notice, everything else is complete. All right? At the end of the semester, I told you I'm going to give you that last week at least to work on your portfolio. That's worth 100 points. So that's the equivalent of a test. So I'm not going to lie to you. If you just looked cheesy last time, then you're going to lose points. Then you're going to lose points if it still looks cheesy. All right? It should look professional. If you're going to have a picture in there and you're told to put a picture of you, it should be a small picture of you, period. All right? And as far as what else is left, tomorrow while you're taking the test, I'm going to be grading your chapters 11 and 12 homework. Then after that, there's 13 and 14 homework. And then everything else that's left, all the other stuff that's left in here, that's going to be the database stuff. So you should have a pretty good idea right now of where you stand in here. But when you look at it, what does that mean? There's 10, 20. These will probably be worth 50 each. So 10, 20, 120, and these will probably be worth 50 each, somewhere around there. So about 250 points there, about. All right, 150 tomorrow, that's 400, and 100 on this. So there's still 500 points in the class outstanding. All right, I know a couple of you said, yeah, I'm real close to an A, I'm half a point off or whatever. You should have enough time to catch up in there. All right, questions? I know that was long without a break, but that's it.